Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome back. Maximize Monday is returned. We're still braving the cold. Depending where you are in the country, you might have been hit again since we've recorded this. So hopefully it wasn't too bad. Hope everyone is staying safe. We got about a foot here in PA, and then we missed the next storm, or we're supposed to. I say that on Friday. Come Monday, we might have seeing all the weather models go in a different direction, and we might have another foot on top of us. But for now, we're here. We're ready to talk about job search. Ashley is back, and this episode is one that we're gonna do just because we see it a lot. I know I'm active or try to be in a lot of like transition educator job boards and groups, and a lot of them talk about how do I get what I do in the classroom to look good on paper so that I'm getting the interviews. And you do so much in the classroom, it's hard to really like pinpoint to those specific skills that you want to transfer over to a new role. So that's what today's episode will be about. And thankfully, Ashley's here and went through that process relatively recently and can kind of share some insight. For me, it's been some time. So I can give some insight on the other side and what we look for on resumes and how to get that best foot forward. But um, transferable skills just kind of overall. And so, Ashley, before we started recording, you were talking about how some of the skills that you need for the job you're in currently, you were doing consistently. And I think that's kind of the battle, right? Is when you go from making that decision. And this isn't just for, educators. This can apply to any job. If you're going from something into a completely new field or industry, you kind of have to look at your past experiences and say what is going to properly transfer versus what is something that I do that is pretty unique to this position. And I know for educators, it can feel like a lot of what you do is unique because grading papers doesn't necessarily say that that's a skill that goes outside the classroom. So turning grading papers into evaluation is one of those things that you have to do. So for you, as you sat down, made the decision, I'm going to move from the classroom into something else. How did you kind of go about determining those skills and, what you felt would be good to transfer into a new role and that you wanted to do too? Because obviously you don't want to transfer skills if you don't like doing those things, right? So how did you kind of go through that process for yourself?
So when it came to transferring my skills, I always looked at the job description and requirements. And so I really had to take a deep dive and understand that. Because I'll be honest, some of the language, if you're not in that, I would say professional realm, it is kind of like foreign language. Like, what is that? So you have to do some dissecting. And I think you have to look at it and try your best to parallel it to what you can do, your skill set as of that time and day. Um, and so it is hard sometimes. I'm going to be honest. Sometimes I would say, "Oh, I love this. This sounds great." And I would try my best to put that resume together. And I would be like, I think I just don't have enough that aligns and
Yeah.
is parallel to this. And so there's been a couple times I'm like, I'm not even going to worry about this
Yeah.
position. Um, but it's more so of really. So for me, what I did is I always thought about my yearly reviews. What are the positives that my leader like she just ranted about, like she just loved about me. And I was like, that has to be from another viewpoint, what is great about me as far as my skill set.
Yeah.
So I elaborated on that, of course. And then I also have some things personal that I feel like was great about myself. And then I just, how does this fit in this world?
Mhm.
Um, and it fits. At first, it is very overwhelming
Yeah.
because we somehow have been, I know for me, been in the education world so long, it's a lot. I had to learn to do this on resumes. But once you figure it out, all it is just changing the verbiage.
Mhm.
Like you can do it, just change it to look like their world.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a good call out and one that people probably don't think of consistently. Everyone has to go through the annual reviews, or you should at least, hopefully. I mean, it's a sign of good leadership is if they're, meeting with you regularly to go over, strengths that you have, areas for improvement, things like that. So determining what you've gotten good feedback for in past roles, and it doesn't even necessarily have to come from your leader, right? You can talk to peers, coworkers, and say, hey, what do you really enjoy working with me specifically about? What do I do that makes me a good coworker to you, and highlight those skills as well? And that's something I had actually never thought of until you just said that right now. So it's always good to get that insight too from an outside perspective, because you're obviously going to hype yourself up, or in some instances probably be overly critical too, right? So getting that outside perspective is certainly going to help you when it comes to determining what skills you do have that kind of carry over into a new role.
That's so funny you said that because when I was a team leader, what I would do at the end of the year, I would go around because we would eat lunch together. I would go around and say, what is one thing I did well this year, and what is one thing you would encourage me to work on?
Yeah,
I'm really big on feedback because I can't view myself out of my body. I
yeah,
can't get better and improve if I don't get feedback.
yeah.
And so that's one thing that I did at the end of the year. And I really reflected on that. And
Mhm.
I always, next year, I tried to be a better leader based
Yeah.
on their bird eye view of me.
Yeah, absolutely. And depending, and again, this is for like a classroom type setting, depending on what grade you're teaching too, I think the students can be a resource for you in that regard too. I
Mhm.
mean, if you have students telling you, you're my favorite teacher, it's always good to dig into that, why, what specifically. And obviously grade level will probably play a part in that. If I asked my first grader, why do you like your teacher so much? She'll say he's funny, and you probably
Yeah.
can't put that on your resume. But if you can get that type of information from the probably your harshest critics in the students, the ones that are with you every day, and have to they can tell you, I like to learn from you because of this reason. It's another good aspect and a skill you can try to carry over. So that being said, we always talk about the transferable skills in general, and hard versus soft skills. And I think the soft skills are the ones that we have found are the easier ones to move over, right? Your communication skills, your time management, project management, conflict resolution, stuff like that is going to be universal when you're talking about any position that you're in. I don't know of many positions that don't require you to be able to work collaboratively, and work with different teams and communicate well. And even if you're sitting at a computer and programming, you probably still have to communicate to people like, hey, we need to do this. Hey, we need to change this. So those are things that are going to be pretty common stuff that you can take over with you. So Ashley, how did you kind of challenge yourself to look beyond that? Those core skills that you're going to have and need no matter what, versus what you were doing in the classroom, and kind of being able to highlight those too. Because everyone, if you're in a professional setting, especially if you're an educator, clearly we know you have good communication and time management
Mhm.
skills and leadership and conflict resolution, or you wouldn't be in the classroom, right? You wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to do that. So I think highlighting those things, it certainly is helpful, but it's kind of those things that we probably already assume you have. So how did you go about balancing those skills that you had on your resume to highlight the other ones, the hard skills that are more industry specific?
So for me with the hard skills, those are like more teachable and measurable based in that role, in
Mm-hmm.
that environment,
Yeah.
professional environment. Um, and what I did for my specific role, like you said earlier, luckily I did have some hands-on experience with a lot of the job description and requirements. But I, and it has helped. I basically showcased how I did that in the education sector and how and what it would look like. Like, for instance, when I went into the interview, I had already researched what are the common misconceptions, like what can go wrong, because they're hiring you for a reason,
Yeah.
probably to fix issues or something.
Yeah.
And so I went in because one of my I would say one of my skills you need to have for the role is organization.
Mhm.
I literally went in, I created a mock organization tool. I went in and I showed them like
Yeah.
how to use it. Um, and for me, that can be teachable because for instance, if I didn't know that, that's probably what I would be trained on. Like, this is what you should use. This is what is going to help for things to be smooth. But I already went in with it because I already did prior research,
Mhm.
how to rectify and solve those conflicts. So it's things like that, just taking a handle and finding it. And I would say a hard skill would be that measurable, teachable.
Yeah.
But getting ahead of that, especially going into an interview, showcasing that, that's a win-win.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's kind of a good way to go into those interviews because, we see it a lot and again, this isn't just for educators, but we're using that example because that's where we both came from. You look at job descriptions and you're like, I can do this. Yes, I do this every day. Yeah, I can do this. But, you know that the
Mhm.
person interviewing you can probably not see that just based on what
Right.
they're doing in the interview. So having that opportunity to go into that and kind of show them like you mentioned you did of I can say as much as I want that I'm able to do this role, that when it comes time to prove it, make sure you have those examples ready to go for sure. And I think that's a good segue to the next question here is because sometimes you're in that position and looking for that new role, and if you have a current role and you're looking to move into something new, then you don't necessarily have that pressure and you're still in that professional setting, keeping those skills soft. And there are other times where you make the decision that, I can't or don't want to do this anymore. It's time for me to change and I'm going to fully focus on my job search like you did. How did you go about keeping those skills fresh and sharp throughout the job search process when you weren't, lack of better term, on the front lines every day and in the classroom still kind of honing in on that stuff?
So one thing I would say that it was an everyday thing for me was communication,
Mhm.
written communication,
Yeah.
because I was reaching out to these people, LinkedIn, email, just learning and sharpening my professional written skills. That
Mhm.
was amazing right there
Yeah.
because the role I'm in right now, I am emails and team messages all day, every day when I'm at work. And so to find, I would say, better professional ways to, especially when in a conflict resolution,
Mhm.
uh, it has taught me to sit in that moment and think instead of just responding.
Yeah.
Um, so during my time, I would say that was my number one thing, just communication, sharpening those professional communication skills.
Mhm.
Um, Another way I would do that, I don't know if we talked about this, like how I would get the interviews, but I just would not land it.
Mhm.
So just imagine um, getting these interviews, going through the rounds. I had to communicate with these people post interview, pre interview. So I would say my number one thing was just the written skills. That's what I sharpened, I would say, on a daily during my job search journey.
Yeah.
Um, because that's just what I was doing. I was on my computer, to be quite honest, every day, including Sundays.
Yeah.
Just because when you're in that moment and you really want to land a job, you're going to do just about anything and everything,
Mhm.
because you're trying to reach whatever that destination is for you, you're trying to reach it.
Yeah.
And your mind naturally you just pick up the phone and get on LinkedIn versus Instagram or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So that's just written communication. That's just something I think I did every day during that journey.
Yeah, and I think that's a common misconception for people that are in the search. And this is going back years, fresh out of college, and my parents being like, "Oh, you need to apply to jobs all day, every day," and it's like that's fine, but I can't really do that. I mean, at the end of the day, I can send out 100, applications, and if these are 95 of the positions I'm not qualified for, or might not even want to do, then it's just kind of a waste of time, right? So, when you're kind of in that mode, and I know people that are currently working and looking at the same time, talking about, man, if I wasn't working, I would have more time to dedicate to this. But being more strategic with your time is certainly going to be better suited. And it sounds like that's kind of how you approached the situation. It wasn't, applying for the sake of applying. You were doing the research, you were reaching out to people, talking to people. And I think that's kind of one of those things that gets lost in the shuffle, especially when, you're full-time job searching, is because you get into that mindset of, I have to find something, and doesn't always benefit you. It puts additional pressure on yourself. And I think you're a good example of navigating that, because I'm sure you probably were, but you never seemed flustered. You never seemed to be negative about the experience. And I think that's what I've always talked about, how I connected with you is just because during the whole process you were positive, you were looking at everything in terms of, what can I take away from this, as opposed to why is this happening to me. And I think that, that's not really a mindset you can coach, right? You've got to find that for yourself. So how did you do that? What were some of the ways that you pushed yourself to get through that, and use that as a transferable skill as well, your ability to work through conflict?
I would, so, when people ask, how are you doing? I always said, I'm doing okay. If I complain, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
It just rolls off my tongue at this point
Yeah.
because it's real. If I do complain, what's going to change?
Mhm.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So why not just lead with positivity?
Mhm.
Why not? It's
Yeah.
it's hard. Do not get me wrong. I'm not sitting here and saying it's tough, but I would always say, look at the glass half full rather than empty.
Mhm.
Find the positive. And one thing that just kept me in the race, it can't storm forever. It
Yeah.
literally cannot storm forever.
Mhm.
Something's going to happen. And once I got my role, when people would tell me it's timing, I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
I fully understand it now because I really do think this role was relieved and made free for myself.
Mhm.
Just because how I'm excelling in the role, just being a month in,
Yeah.
getting the feedback from my supervisor, like I I didn't expect it to be so smooth, to be quite honest, because I'm
Sure.
going from education to corporate.
Right.
Um, but timing, like you're not gonna probably understand that until it happens,
Yeah.
but timing and just staying in the race, don't give up and don't give up because when you stop, that next application submission is probably your opportunity, but you don't know that because sometimes we get so deep in our sorrows, and I do understand
Yeah.
frustration, but it could be the next opportunity, the next role that pops up that is suggested for you, and that you feel like you align with it. Put that application in.
Yeah.
Another thing is, I wanted to post this on LinkedIn about the timeline.
Mhm.
It takes a minute. I literally had to write it out, like when the job posted, when I applied, when I received the call, the interview, the offer, the start date. Like literally it went from October to January.
Mhm.
So just be patient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked about, the hard and the soft skills, and, making that list of these are skills that I really, have developed over my time and what I want to take with me onto the next role. And I think one of the things, and this is a good question for you now, because you're, into your new role, is the unknowns, right? There are going to come times where you're in your new position and they say, "Hey, I need you to do this." And like, "Oh, I used to do this all the time. Didn't even think about that." So it's more of, how do you challenge yourself to really dig into that, get the understanding of, some of those skills that you do every day, and they almost become routine that you wouldn't think like, oh, this would be good on a resume. This is something that I should put on there that I do commonly. Or were there any instances during your job search where you would go through the interviews or read the job descriptions and see things that you hadn't thought of, oh, they're looking for this, I do this all the time, so type of situation?
Um, okay. I'm just gonna look at my prior role because I applied to so many roles, so I'm
Sure.
sure it was. Um, so in this one, it had to do with scheduling.
Mhm.
And I was like, scheduling, I really don't schedule.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
but essentially I did schedule.
Yeah,
I had to think. I scheduled parent teacher conference.
yeah.
Um, I was responsible for creating I'm in Texas, if anyone didn't know. So in Texas, we have the STAR test, and that is the state testing for students' grades 3 through 12. And so I was a fourth grade teacher. And so as the team leader, I created the STAR practice, but I turned it into a game, like game based to make it fun, because we
Mhm.
would usually do it the Friday prior to the week of the test.
Yeah,
And so while creating these games, the idea was for the kids to shuffle through everybody's room. Every room would have a different teak, every room would have a different game related to the. Well, I thought about it. I had to schedule that. I had to schedule the rotations. I had to include the times. I had to make sure it ran seamless. I was like, girl, you do have experience with scheduling. So it really it really takes time for you to just think, especially like me, 9 years. I have to like think, what did I do in 9 years?
yeah,
What did I do just recently in a few months? Like, what did I do throughout my span of my career?
right.
And it doesn't hit you until, to be honest, you really find a role that you love. And so you just think, like, I know I did this. And then that's how I was like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things. I mean, it's especially when you talk scheduling and like time management falls into that. And you can say I have strong time management skills. When they say prove it, like if you have 80-minute blocks that you need to fill, with 25 students, how are you going to do that? And without, leaving 30 minutes of unaccounted for time. You don't want to give.
I'm so sorry. That's my kid.
Oh, no worries. No worries at all. So yeah, I think it's a good insight to have. And so, before we wrap for the episode, just any other final advice you can share to people that are kind of struggling with pulling that type of transferable skills. How can they deeper self-reflect and pull a little bit more out of themselves than just the things that we've already mentioned?
I would honestly say if it's a role that you really, if it's a company you like, if it's a role that you aspire to thrive in, and you feel like you don't have, you look at the requirements and you're like, I can't do this. No, like really just stop and think. Just look at your skill set
Hmm.
can transfer.
Yeah,
I don't know if you use ChatGPT for this, but it does transfer somehow, some way.
yeah,
You're just gonna have to manipulate those words and make it fit that. But 9 times out of 10, you can do it. You just have to find the best wording.
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And good segue for our next episode because we will have Cedric on with us to talk about, using AI tools for all of that. So thank you, Ashley, for, the time, of course, today. And, we'll both be off for a couple weeks, but we'll talk to you soon and hope you have a great week ahead.
Yes, I hope this is helpful. Thank you.